Let us look at the poem Somebody's Mother, written by Mary Dow Bryan. Before we learn the poem in detail, let us learn something about the poetess. Mary Dow Bryan, 1816 to 1913, was a famous children's author, poet, and lyricist from New York, USA. Many of her poems and children's books have been published by numerous important publishers. She also wrote the lyrics for Hearts and Flowers, a late 19th century piano piece that did not sell well until she provided the lyrics for it, after which it became a hit. She is best known for her poem Somebody's Mother. It was first published in Bryan's Madge, The Violet Girl, and Other Poems in 1881. The poem is about an elderly lady who is unaided by the passing crowd of adults and schoolboys, but then a child, one of the schoolboys, comes to help her. Let us read the poem now. So, students, as I read the poem, kindly listen to it carefully. Somebody's Mother by Mary Dow Bryan. The woman was old and ragged and grey, and bent with the chill of a winter's day. The streets were white with a recent snow, and the woman's feet with age were slow. At the crowded crossing she waited long, jostled aside by the careless throng of human beings who passed her by, unheeding the glance of her anxious eye. Down the street with laughter and shout, glad in the freedom of school led out, come happy boys like a flock of sheep, hailing the snow-piled white and deep. Past the woman so old and grey, hasten the children on their way. None offered a helping hand to her, so weak and timid, afraid to stir, lest the carriage wheels or the horses' feet should trample her down in the slippery street. At last came out of the merry troop the gayest boy of all the group. He paused beside her and whispered low, "I'll help you across if you wish to go." Her aged hand on his strong young arm she placed, and so without hurt or harm he guided the trembling feet along, proud that his own were young and strong. Then back again to his friends he went, his young heart happy and well content. She's somebody's mother, boys, you know, for all she's aged and poor and slow. And someone sometime may lend a hand to help my mother, you understand, if ever she's old and poor and grey, and her own dear boy so far away. Somebody's mother bowed low her head in her home that night, and the prayer she said was, "God be kind to that noble boy, who is somebody's son and pride and joy." Let us now look at each stanza separately and understand the poem better. So let's look at the first two stanzas. The woman was old and ragged and grey, and bent with the chill of a winter's day. The streets were white with the recent snow, and the woman's feet with age were slow. At the crowded crossing she waited long, jostled aside by the careless throng of human beings who passed her by, unheeding the glance of her anxious eye. The poem begins by describing how old the woman who is being spoken about in the poem was. So words like old, grey, ragged pretty much gives us an idea that the woman who is being spoken about is an old lady. Now if you see the picture given below, you will see the old lady is really old. Her clothes are also pretty worn out. Now, the poetess has used the words old and grey in the same line. Now, if you look at the meaning of these words, both these words almost mean the same. So, when the poetess uses two words which have a similar meaning in a line itself, it tells us that the poetess really wants to highlight the fact that the lady being spoken about is really very old. Now, being a winter's day, temperature being pretty cold, this old lady was unable to bear the cold temperature. It was so cold, she was unable to bear it, that this lady could not even walk straight. She had to bend down and walk. Now, look at the street. The street is completely filled with snow. So that means it had just snowed recently. And here you have this old lady waiting to cross the street. Since she is old, her feet were also not able to move fast. Now, since we are young, we are able to walk fast, do anything fast, right? But she is an old lady. Each step she is taking it with lot of difficulties, and to make it even worse is the cold temperature. Okay, so now you see this old lady, she is waiting here for a pretty long time, and we all know she just wants to cross the street. But why is she waiting if she wanted to cross the street? She is waiting for someone to look at her, to notice her and help her to cross the street. Now, there are so many people who passed by her. Some even pushed her, but none of them even looked at her. None of the people who walked by her even noticed that there is an old lady who needs your help, who needs help to cross the street. Since she could not speak through words, her eyes were speaking a lot, and her eyes were keenly waiting for someone to just come, hold her hands, and just help her to cross the road. But sadly, the people moving by, none of them even looked at her, even the people who just pushed her and walked away. Let us now look at the third and fourth stanza. Down the street, with laughter and shout, glad in the freedom of school let out, came happy boys like a flock of sheep, hailing the snow-piled white and deep. Past the woman so old and grey, hastened the children on their way. None offered a helping hand to her, so weak and timid, afraid to stir, lest the carriage wheels or the horses' feet should trample her down in the slippery street. So you have a group of young boys coming out from school, all laughing and shouting as they were all excited since school just got over, freedom now for them, and they all come out like a flock of sheep. And these young boys were also excited since it had just snowed, and seeing the snow, definitely they will also want to play around. And when they were in school, they must have thought like, wow, it's snowing outside, when will school get over so that we can just move out and play with snow. So all these young boys pretty much laughing and shouting as they move out of school. And here you have this old lady still waiting for someone to help her cross the road. And these young children too move past her very quickly, and none of them still noticed this old lady who was still anxiously waiting for someone to offer help. Now, none offered a helping hand to her. She was weak, she was shy to even ask for help, she was even afraid to move slightly, take a small step forward. She was worried that if she would just take a step ahead, and if a carriage comes, either the wheel or the horse's feet would have trampled her leg. Now, when we cross the road, while we are crossing, if we see a vehicle moving very quickly, how do we react to it? We either run and cross the street across, or we move back. Now, since we are young, we are able to do that quickly in a balanced way. But here you have this old lady who is unable to walk fast. Her feet moves very slowly as described in the first stanza, and she's also worried that since it just snowed, what would happen if she would just take a step behind? She might even slip, trip, and fall down because the street was slippery. So, because of these reasons, she was all the more afraid to cross the road. Let's move on to the fifth and sixth stanza. At last came out of the merry troop the gayest boy of all the group. He paused beside her and whispered low, "I'll help you across if you wish to go." Her aged hand on his strong young arm she placed, and so without hurt or harm he guided the trembling feet along, proud that his own were young and strong. Then back again to his friends he went, his young heart happy and well content. The previous stanza we saw a group of boys laughing and shouting, and these young boys too moved quickly away from this old lady. But now, from this merry troop, okay, this group was so happy, finally one of the boy who seems to be the happiest of all approached her, stood next to her, and whispered and told, "I'll help you across if you wish to go." Okay, so finally you have someone coming and offering help to this young lady. So many people moved across, but none of them noticed this old lady. But here you have a young boy who seems to be the happiest of all, who noticed her and came quickly to offer help to her. Now, this old lady is really very happy that finally someone has come to help her. So, you have her aged hand holding on to the strong young man's arm, and now she crossed the road without any fear of being hurt or fear of being harmed, because she knows she is being guided by a young boy, so she need not worry at all. So here you have this boy guiding this old lady whose feet are still trembling. And at that moment, this young boy too is very proud that at this moment his own legs were young and strong. So finally he helped this old woman to cross the road, and after that he again went back to his friends. But this young boy was even more happier, and he felt even more contented. Okay, now what did this boy do? he just helped an old lady cross the street. This old lady did not give him any materialistic thing in return, but still, this young boy went back feeling contented. Now, what does this try to tell us? The poetess, somewhere through this poem, at this point, wants us to understand the fact that the little deeds we do, especially helping others without expecting anything in return, gives us much greater joy compared to any materialistic things which people give to us. As a person, you feel happy and contented that you are able to help someone, you are able to bring a smile to someone, and that feeling itself makes you feel happy and contented in return. Let us now look at the last two stanzas, stanza 7 and 8. She is somebody's mother, boys, for all she is aged and poor and slow, and someone sometime may lend a hand to help my mother, you understand. If ever she is old and poor and grey, and her own dear boy so far away, somebody's mother bowed low her head in her home that night, and the prayer she said was, God, be kind to that noble boy, who is somebody's son and pride and joy. Now, among the group of boys, we see that only one boy came back to help this old lady cross the street. Now, when he went back to his friends probably would have asked him, why did you go back to help the lady cross the road? There are so many around, they could have helped too. So to this, the young boy replied that this lady is somebody's mother, and this lady is old, she is poor, she is slow, and there might come a time when my mother becomes old, poor and grey, and if I am far away, then there might be someone else who comes and offers help to her. So, see the response of this young boy. The response is very important to understand. Now, we think that if we help someone, that someone should only help us in return. But things don't work like that. Now, a small action of helping someone does not go unnoticed. We don't need to tell everyone that we have helped someone, but that action, if done truly, the reward of it does come back in return. So if there comes a time when we really need help, God will definitely send another medium, another person who will help you, and it is at that moment you are really rewarded for your deed which you have done right now. Now that night, the somebody's mother, that is the old lady, she bowed low her head that night and she prayed to God for that young boy. She prayed that God be kind to him, because he is also somebody's son, he is somebody's pride and joy. So that old lady did not forget his deed at all. She was grateful to the young boy. She was not able to give him any materialistic things, but she gave him something even much more great, and that is by keeping him in her prayers. And especially when you help someone and that person remembers you in your prayers, that really means a lot, because somewhere it's like, blessings being added to you, and you never know, that prayer that person offered for you might come handy, especially at times of need. Okay, so this poem teaches us that we should help one another. Okay, that's the most important message that we see in this poem. Now, let us look at the central idea of the poem. The central idea of the poem is we should always try to help people in need, because you never know when your old mother or you yourself will need help, right? So, in this world, everyone at some point or the other faces a situation where we do need someone's help. So, if you expect someone to help you, you too should be able to help someone in return. If you don't help others, then you should not be expecting others to help you in return. Okay, so the strong message that the poetess wants to give us through this poem is we should always try to help people, especially when you get the opportunity to do it. Definitely help people around you. Let's look at the figures of speech used in the poem. Let's begin with the first line of the poem. The woman was old and ragged and grey. Now you will notice that the word and is repeated twice in the line. So the figure of speech used is a repetition. Now there are two words which have similar meanings, that is old and grey. So in a line, if there are two words used having similar meanings, the figure of speech used is tautology. So the first line of the poem is strongly a tautology, then a repetition. The streets were white with recent snow. Now the figure of speech used in this line is alliteration. Now here you will see two examples. Firstly, the sound of sir. So you will denote it as S. So the initial sound of the letter S is repeated in the words streets and snow. Another example is the initial letter of the word, the sound of the letter W, which is repeated in the words white and wit. Third one, and the woman's feet with age were slow. Now if you look at this line, this sentence is not arranged in correct grammatical order. So the figure of speech used is inversion. The correct order should be, and the woman's feet were slow with age. Okay, fourth one, at the crowded crossing, she waited long. Now this line again is an alliteration where you have the initial sound of the letter cr. Okay, so you will write it as cr, repeated in the words crowded and crossing, and the poet has used this definitely for better poetic effect. The next one, unheeding the glance of her anxious eyes. Now the figure of speech used here is transferred epithet. Now the epithet anxious is transferred from the old woman to her eyes. Okay, Okay, so who is anxious? It is the old woman who is anxious. But here the word anxious is only being described for the eyes, but in reality we know it was the old lady who was anxious. Okay, next one is very simple figure of speech that we've learned in the earlier classes. Come happy boys like a flock of sheep. Yes, the figure of speech used is definitely a simile. Now here the boys are directly compared to a flock of sheep. Next one, past the woman so old and grey. Okay, similar to the first example given, same words used having similar meaning, old and grey. So the figure of speech used is tautology. Let's continue. None offered a helping hand to her. The figure of speech used is an alliteration, as the initial sound of the letter H is repeated in the words helping and hand for better poetic effect. So weak and timid, afraid to stir. Now if you look at the words weak and timid, both have similar meaning, they express similar ideas. So the figure of speech used is tautology. Her aged hand on his strong young arm she placed. Now the words in this line are not arranged in correct grammatical order. So the figure of speech used is an inversion. So the correct grammatical order should be, she placed her aged hand on his strong young arm. She placed and so without hurt or harm. The figure of speech used here is alliteration, as the sound of the letter H is repeated in the words hurt or harm for better poetic effect. Then back again to his friends he went. Now this line, again the words are not arranged in correct grammatical order. So the correct grammatical order should be, then he went back again to his friends. So the figure of speech used here is inversion. Okay, next one. His young heart happy and well content. Now there are two figure of speech used here. One is synecdoche and the other one is transferred epithet. Now synecdoche because the heart as a part is used to refer to the boy as a whole. So the word heart in the line is actually referring to the boy as a whole. Now why is it a transferred epithet? The epithet happy is transferred from the boy to his heart. So who is happy? The boy is happy. But here the word happy is telling us more about the word heart. So that is why the figure of speech used here is a transferred epithet also. Okay, next one. She is somebody's mother, boys you know. Here too the words are not arranged in correct grammatical order. So the correct order should be, you know, boys, she is somebody's mother. So the figure of speech used is an inversion. And someone sometime may lend a hand. The figure of speech used is repetition, as the word some is repeated again for poetic effect. In her home that night, and the prayer she said. Now if you look at this line again, the words are not arranged in correct grammatical order. So the figure of speech used is an inversion. The correct grammatical order is, and that night she said the prayer in her home. Okay, so we have looked at various examples of figure of speech used in this poem. I hope students that you have understand the poem well, especially the message what the poetess is trying to give us, that we should help one another. So whenever we get an opportunity, dear students, make sure to help someone in need, because that act of helping, that very deed will never go in waste, and it will come back to you in return, especially when you need someone's help. Okay, so help one another and add more blessings into your life. Thank you.